Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Tuesday, April the 1st, 2025. I promise you I have absolutely zero April Fool's jokes lined up for you tonight. Just the facts, man. Just the facts. And a great guest tonight. You guys have been bugging me for months to get him on. So when it didn't work at first, you started sending me clips of his show, and I went, I like this guy. Frank Vaughan, host of the Fulcrum, is going to join the show in just a couple of minutes. And man, he's got some interesting stories to tell. We were just talking before the show, very compelling. And I'm very happy to bring him on for you guys in the next couple of minutes. The show, as always, is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
It's amazing. It has several natural health benefits, and it's been used for hundreds of years for health and healing. That's the main reason they made silverware from silver. But seriously, this nano silver from Silverceuticals is the best and safest silver you can find. There are hundreds of studies and reports on it. I've read some of the studies myself, and it's mind-blowing. One of the things that sets Silverceuticals apart is that it washes out of your body in 24 hours. No silver buildup and no turning blue. And it won't even harm the good bacteria your body needs. It's so effective they can use very small concentrations of silver, like 10 and 32 parts per million, and still outperform other silvers that have up to 3,000 parts per million. It's safer and more effective at the same time. It is an incredibly small particle that is small enough to work through your body, but big enough not to fall out of suspension. They infuse it into almost all of their products. It works in facial serums, toothpaste, gels, and even gummies that work to help your immune system.
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. If you want to make an order, you can just call Kevin and Anna if you like, 204-808-9292. And this coming weekend, they're going to be in Calgary for the National Women's Show. Here it is, Stampede Park, BMO Center, Calgary, Alberta, Saturday from 10 till 6 and Sunday from 10 until 5. And if you live in the this is actually really cool if you live in the Calgary area. Go to the website right now. CanadaNanoSilver.com. CanadaNanoSilver.com. Hit the contact button and then tell Kev, hey, I'd like some free tickets for the event this weekend. They have some free tickets to give away. We'll be making draws for that on Thursday or Friday. I got to talk to Kev more about this in detail, but they are giving away 10 pairs of free tickets for the National Women's Show in Calgary this coming weekend. So if you want a free pair of tickets, and I believe it's like 10, 12, 15 bucks to get in there this weekend. Get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab at CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. I'm not saying you're going to win. I'm saying you have a chance to win tickets for the big women's show this weekend in Calgary. All right, let's go say some hellos real quick here. Who's watching? Mo is watching in Niverville. Hello, Kevin. Julia in London, Ontario. Narand is watching tonight. The Shagitator. Okay, you guys are asking, so what the hell happened at the Conservative rally on Saturday? Okay, so here's what happened in case you missed the video that I put up this past weekend. It's going to be real quick, short and sweet. I got kicked out as a known agitator, and I have yet to receive any sort of explanation for this. However, I would like to put this out to any representatives of the Conservative Party of Canada who may be watching this right now. What are you guys doing? Like, seriously, what do you think you're doing? Do you enjoy shooting yourself in the foot like that? The timing, I'll admit, wasn't great because a few days before I'd gotten into a fight with Viva Fry on Twitter regarding the People's Party of Canada and what a sham it is. I didn't say sham. What did I say? I said PPC must stand down because we can't have any vote splitting right now with the polls so ridiculously tight, if in fact they're tight at all. We don't know what to believe at this stage of the game, and I believe that's exactly the way they want it. We're going to talk about that and more with our guest tonight, Frank Vaughan, host of the Fulcrum, in just a second. This is Shadow at Night. We'll be right back in 30 seconds. I thought I put myself on the screen, but it was only Frank there for a second. Hey, Frank, thanks for coming on tonight. Really appreciate you taking the time.
That's what we call a cold open right there.
Big time. Just Big Frank, no shadow. Listen, my friend, we were having a great conversation before we went on, and as much as I would love to just pick up where we left off, we have to bring in the people, and the people want to know, did Frank Vaughan, host of the Fulcrum, just appear one day out of nowhere? I know that you've got an intro video on your YouTube channel, which I've watched, but there are so many people who go, there's this new guy who's just appeared, and man, he makes a lot of sense. So we got to go back in time, I think, and maybe give us an abridged version of the Frank Vaughan story.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you go right back to the very beginning, it was 2012, and I had my awakening to the Carbon Con and realizing that the world wasn't going to end, and I was doing a bunch of reading science and journals and everything else, and I realized the entire thing was a con. So I got involved in a Facebook group called Join the Fight to Stop Global Warming, and it had about 250,000 members. And I just spent all kinds of time in there debating and linking and showing people things. And I was having a profound effect for a while. Their numbers were declining by the thousands by the week. So they finally kicked me out. And that was back in the day when we could have debate on CBC, on the Weather Network. Every single website had a chat. It was the heyday of the internet. That was my first experience. And then in 2015, I watched the speech of Trump announcing that he was running for the U.S. president. I listened to his words.
Wait, hold on. Just before 2012 and the whole climate thing, what were you before all of this?
Just a farmer.
Just a regular guy?
Yeah, I farmed. That's all okay. I did. I had a nursery, greenhouses, intensive farming. I ran farmers markets, and that's pretty much my pedigree right there. I'm a product of the working class.
Cool. All right. That's because, it's interesting when a guy just appears, as it seems to a lot of people out there in the last 6 months when you came back online with your show, which is so, as far as I'm concerned, so provocative, thought-provoking, and so brilliantly put together and so eloquently, the way you tell your stories. I'm compelled with your stuff, and there's no wonder that you're gaining followers by the thousands every single day, every single week. It's just that good. So let's go to 2015. You were talking about the Trump thing.
Yeah, and I guess just, I might have been a farmer, but my father put in my hands when I was 7 years old a book about the Second World War, and I didn't understand it. And I had to spend a lot of time figuring out words so that I could understand what I was reading. And I've just been into nonfiction ever since. Like it's been a passion of mine. I used to skip class in high school and I'd spend it in the library. And the principal used to know that I'd be down there, so he'd leave me alone, and I would have all of these pink slips at the end of the year, and they would just disappear for me. So I've always been interested in it. But yeah, 2015, I watched the speech of Trump. I followed his press conferences. There was a particular press conference where he argued with Jorge Ramos. For 7 minutes, he debated this guy. After he kicked him out, he brought him back in and he had this debate. And I'm like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He went to the primaries. He started talking about Saudi involvement with 9/11 and saying some things I'd never heard a political leader say before, talking about illegal immigration. I'm like, this is something. So I got involved on social media pretty heavy. I started making videos. I started making compilations. I started doing stuff. And I was telling you before that was the biggest social media presence I ever had was back then. And then the election came, he was inaugurated, and I walked away from it. I just dropped it. I dropped everything I had other than anything that was in my name. I had a very small YouTube channel in my name, but I dropped it. 2017, the conservative leadership race comes along. I see Maxime Bernier running. I liked what he had to say in his platform, running for the leadership. There was some stuff I had problems with, the pro-China stuff, the pro-Trans-Pacific Partnership. He was very proud of the Foreign Investment Protection Act. He was critical of Justin Trudeau not opening up Canada via a free trade agreement to communist Chinese money. I didn't like those things, but there was a lot of other stuff that I did like, so I got involved there. I went to the Conservative Party convention, the first time I ever attended a convention. I watched the shenanigans that went down with the vote. And then after that, I got to know Max a little bit better. Subsequently, he ended up quitting the CPC. we registered the PPC. I was one of the, like, not just a founding member, I was a founding registrant. I'm one of the signatures with Elections Canada. I gave the opening speech at their first conference. I hosted and emceed the biggest event they had in Hamilton. That year, I ran as a candidate. I published a bunch of my debate footage recently. I put that back up because everybody was asking for it. And then the election came, the election went, everybody went on vacation. The promised constitution didn't materialize. So I went public saying it's nothing but a corporation unless it has a constitution and it has member rights. Everybody told me to go suck a lemon, so I quit. And then, I got involved. I also seen this thing happening in China where it looked like something very serious was happening. They were locking down hundreds of millions of people. All of our politicians were doing pressers in front of all-you-can-eat Chinese food buffets saying it was racist to stop planes and it was racist to talk about China in any way that was disparaging. They were talking about how masks were dangerous and all this other stuff. That stopping planes of non-citizens was too much of an infringement on their charter rights. And I said, their story is going to change. And when it does, you better be ready for it. You better be ready to duck because there's going to be sweeping powers. I didn't pretend to know specifics, but I'm like, they're going to screw a lot of stuff up. And,
was this a pattern recognition thing that you had back here that you could see this coming based upon how they were treating Trump, the climate thing before that?
Yeah, I mean, you can start to see things coming together. You can see events. I don't think it's anything necessarily prophetic. It's just, here's China doing something very unique and stand out in the world that they've never done before, and our politicians are saying it's nothing. That is just a huge red flag for me. And then it was, I interviewed vaccine guys that said they were vaccine makers, virologists from the Winnipeg lab. I'm not going to say which ones. And my question of concern with them was they're going to eventually offer some kind of treatment, some kind of medical treatment. And they all told me that if it was rushed to market, that if it was marketed within the next even 2 years, that you should stay away from it because it was jumping all these regulatory hurdles. And that was the message I brought to everybody. Avoid that before it was even talked about as a solution. And then I was saying to behind the scenes, it was either 2020 or early 2021. We started making these videos about how to increase resilience so that in the face of the government shutting down the economy and breaking the global supply chain, you could have a measure of peace while everybody around you was panicking. So we taught people how to grow things and how to produce food and how to just relax and know where your strongest legal grounding was, which was on your own private property and in your home. And so we did that for a while. And this is why people think, I'm sorry, this is long-winded. I'm trying to be short.
It's all right, man.
I think the reason people think I come out of nowhere is because around that time, people started showing up in my house. I had a public-facing business, and this is part I didn't explain when I was doing farmers markets. My address was public. It was online because I was selling my produce, and I had a farm business, so people could just drive in the driveway and pick stuff up. Well, they were watching my videos, and they were doing that. And everybody that showed up was pretty friendly, but it was kind of spooky when I had a newborn son and my wife asleep inside. And then one morning I got up and it was clear that somebody was rustling around my house at night while we were inside asleep. And so I had a decision to make, and that decision was pretty easy. So I pulled everything down. I disappeared. I arranged to sell my house and I relocated. And my intention was to jump right back into this when I got here. But as I was saying to you, I had a long period of introspection, and I watched my little kids turn into toddlers, and now my boy's 5 years old. He's turned into a little boy, and I figured out that this is where I belong, and I have to come back because I don't have anything I'm selling. I don't have a political narrative that I'm invested in. I literally just want to try and find the truth about everything. And one day I'm someone's hero, and the next day they hate me, and that's the way I want it to be.
Yeah, that's that sounds exactly how I feel regarding everything that happens. It's a very mirror image, the two of us. And, interestingly, when I was tossed out of this conservative rally on the weekend as a known agitator, I still get a chuckle out of that. It was maybe 2 days before that I was saying, look, PPC, Max, you got to stand down. We can't afford to be splitting the vote right now. PPC candidates. And you know what? I really have a problem saying that publicly because over the past 5 years, I have made friends with many PPC people who ran in the past, and I'm sure you probably multiply that by 100. And they're good people. They're solid people. They're grounded people. They're family people. They're homeowners. They're business owners, or they've been working jobs for a very long time. Some of them have wised up to what the party has become in the past few years, and they've walked away from it like you have. But there are still other people who believe that Max wants the best, and I'm just not sold on that. His continual hammering on the Conservative Party of Canada is the thing that makes me wonder the most about that. I think I sent you this earlier today, but I'm going to put it up on the screen for people. This is April Fool's Day, and so Maxime Bernier puts out a tweet and a post on Facebook. He says, breaking, CPC and PPC will merge. I'm back in the Conservative Party. Pierre and I had a long conversation, reached an agreement. He goes on, blah, 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 blah. And, of course, it's April Fool's Day. And I will never rejoin the Conservative Party. You've spent time with Maxime Bernier, Frank, more than I have. I've interviewed him here 3 or 4 times on the show. I could have had him on again now, but I've decided against it because I don't see a point. Who is this guy?
I don't know who he is. I don't know what his objectives are. It's not to win elections. I know that. The PPC is not designed to grow. They oppose common sense things that would make the PPC grow. He lives in fear of his members who aren't really members. I mean, in a technical sense, they are, because there is an entity that is a political party that's registered with Elections Canada, but that entity's never had a founding convention. So the members aren't really members. They're more like serfs. They can dedicate their time and work for free. They can send money, but otherwise everything descends from on high. And Max is a self-described dictator that sits at the top of the pyramid. There's no mechanism for anybody to advance policy. They've never held a vote. They've never agreed to any document. It just comes down from on high. And they don't want to change that. They're not going to change that until Maxime retires. That is their stated position. So you would think, considering the existential threat to this country, and I don't say that lightly, that Mark Carney and his party represents. This guy was parachuted in from Europe. He's ran 2 central banks. There's more crooked dealings and shady dealings with Brookfield and his financial history than I can shake a stick at. 1 minute he's saying one thing, the next minute he's saying something else. The man has no center. Yesterday morning, he was defending a candidate who said, yeah, turn over my opponent to the Chinese authorities, collect yourself a cool $1 million, and he'll go off to a gulag in China and maybe he'll get shot. They didn't. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the sequence of consequence. If you hand somebody over to Chinese authorities, all of those things would then transpire, one would assume, or at the very least end up in jail. Defending him in the morning, and then in the afternoon, the guy's gone. The cameras are on, and he's saying he'll debate Pierre Poilievre. Cameras turn off, and he backs out. He says that the relationship, and this is literally the most dangerous thing I've ever heard anybody running for public office, let alone prime minister in this country, ever say that the relationship with the Americans that we've had for all these years is over, which, I mean, my mind blew up when I heard that. I didn't read it. I watched it, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And then the next day he's saying, I had a very productive call with Donald Trump. He respected our sovereignty. It's like, who are you, man? And we kind of know who he is. At any rate, if you really cared about Canada, you'd be fighting this guy, because right now they are trying to make the Conservatives lose. The media is trying to make the Conservatives lose. The PPC is trying to make the Conservatives lose. The American podcasting community seems more than happy to see the Conservatives lose. I think Donald Trump wants the Conservatives. Everybody's united against the Poilievre-led Conservative Party, and I'm a bit of a counter-trader. That makes me want to support them even more. And there's enough on the table. This isn't the same party that it was under Sheeran O'Toole. And if you've seen any of my videos, you know I've been critical of them on several of their positions. Ukraine, supporting the Team Canada narrative against Donald Trump, supporting this idea of a trade war, which will just destroy our country. There's enough there that I can be critical because I don't have a particular political axe to grind, but that's our last shot. If we get Carney, it's over. The West leaves this country. Like I'll be the next day after the election. That'll be what I'm working on. Is getting.
I was actually wondering. I mean, you moved from Ontario to the prairies. Are you close enough to Alberta that you could just kind of reach for the line, get over there?
I can get there, but I want to drag Saskatchewan with me. I'd like to drag everything west of the Ontario border with me because I think we're the natural alignment of trade and flow of people is north-south. It's not east-west. And the evidence for that is that we only have one road link and one rail link, and it narrows to 2 lanes, the road between Ontario and the West. So we have 2 separate countries here already. And we've, in the West, been, and I knew this when I was in Ontario, like I wanted to get here for a long time. And I'm so glad I'm here now because I think we're at the historic moment. If Carney wins, things are going to happen so fast that people's heads are going to spin and you're going to want to be already where you want to be.
Let me throw this up for you because this is interesting. I'm sure you've seen this, but for you guys watching, this came out yesterday. Mark Carney talking about Build Canada Homes. Watch this.
Build things in this country. After the Second World War, Canada faced a housing crisis. The government built prefabricated homes that were easy to assemble and inexpensive. And those homes are still here 80 years later. Now we're in another housing crisis. And it's time your government got back into the business of building affordable homes. We will build new homes for Canadians at a pace not seen since the Second World War. We'll build a Canada you can own.
What's your take on that?
500,000 homes a year, $35 billion. That's 1,369 homes a day. What are we doing? We're doing Hong Kong casket housing because that's pretty much what we can afford to do. We're talking about commie housing to solve a problem that the government that's been in office for 10 years created. What's his name? I believe it's his finance minister. Fournier. I'm drawing a gap on this guy's name, but he did a tweet, and I covered it in my video the other day, where he talked about how they're going to unleash the energy. They're going to create economic independence, and they're going to create a fortress North America. It's like, dude, you've been in power 10 years. How can people possibly buy this messaging? You're the same party. Carney didn't come from nowhere. He's been a trusted advisor of Trudeau this entire time. They swapped Trudeau out, denied the Conservative Party that talking point, and now Trudeau's invisible. Nobody's talking about his legacy. Nobody's even asking where he is. The media is pretending that he doesn't exist. It's very weird. It's very contrived. It's very manufactured. So, and then you see these polls. You know, it reminds me of a certain like hockey stick graph that occurred in 2020, just in the polling. And I know how they do sampling. We don't have really good crosstabs in Canada. It's a much more opaque process here. And then Frank Graves of ICOS had the Liberals winning Alberta, and I don't understand how people and you go to 338 Canada and they've still got ICOS in the averages that project their seat totals. So I don't know what the real picture is out there.
Well, there's a couple of new polling companies that have just kind of sprung up out of nowhere in the last 3 weeks as well. And the 338 Canada guy, I forget his name, Francois Philippe something or other, he's buying their polls just like he would for an established pollster out there. And I don't know why that is. To me, it seems like they're all on the take, or they're all being held at gunpoint, or there's something going on here. It's obvious. Polls don't turn like that. They just don't.
I think what they're trying to do, or what the underlying rationale is that Trudeau was seen by the left as the big problem, the big impediment. And now that he's gone, Mark Carney's coming in and he's the savior. He's the savvy one. He's got all the connections. Trump is threatening our sovereignty. He has the ability to draw us closer to Europe because he understands Europe, because he's basically a European, a self-identified European. The man doesn't even identify as Canadian. He's lived outside the country for a decade. So I think there's a legitimate component there that's actually moving back towards the Liberal Party. I don't know if it's as big as they say. And the other thing is, it's not so much the Conservatives weakening as it is the NDP is in collapse, because they serve no purpose anymore. They have no identity. The Liberals led them out further and further to the left, and now Mark Carney's drawn them back to the center. In the public mind, I'm not saying he's actually a centrist. I'm saying that they're playing political games to get votes, and the NDP has just lost. They're borrowing money to finance their campaigns so that when it's all said and done and Singh loses his seat, he's going to hand over a party that was on a sound footing under Jack Layton, and now it is penniless and broke, and will be lucky if they have 2 or 3 seats in Parliament. I mean, the polls are showing between 6 and 9%. They're wiped out. They're washed out. They're done. And those voters are going to the Liberal Party. They're certainly not going to the Conservative Party, because there is a large part of this country, particularly in the eastern part of this country, that think that Pierre Poilievre is Donald Trump North, and then he's the Grim Reaper. And if we give it to him, he'll just sell the country out, which the problem is that Mark Carney's the one that's far more likely to sell the country out from under your feet, because he represents the government that's been selling the country out from under your feet at a vastly accelerated rate. And I don't mean to whitewash the Harper years, like the Foreign Investment Protection Act, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There's lots there too, but nothing like the last 10 years.
You know, that something interesting you just said, particularly the eastern part of Canada, who sees Poilievre as Trump North. You came from there. You moved out west. What were the glaring differences that you noticed as you planted your new roots?
It felt like coming home. When I the first thing I seen when I came into Manitoba, the first sign of human habitation was a great big flag that said F Trudeau. And I'd only ever flown over on my way to BC one time. That's the only time I'd ever been west. So when I came out here, it was my first time, and all I'd ever done is read about it in books. And I knew people out here. I had friends out here. I knew I wanted to get here. So when I arrived, I mean, from day one, it felt like I was coming home. It was a new environment. But when you meet people, you go to the store, everybody was friendly. In Ontario, the mask mandates had been lifted. A week before I left, I wanted to get some nice new jeans so that I could cross the country in something decent, because all I had was track clothes. So I went to Walmart to try and buy some jeans, and I was unsuccessful because there were so many masked people walking around. There were so many zombies that I had to get out of there. I'm like, I'm just going to leave with the clothes on my back. And I got here and I walked into a store, and yeah, they had the plexiglass up, but you could just smell the freedom. Everybody was maskless. Everybody was just living their lives. Now, there's some exceptions. If you go down to Saskatoon, the closer you get to the university, the more people were masked up and looking paranoid. But out in the rural areas, everything looked normal. It was beautiful. And the culture was what I remember Ontario being back in the 1990s when I was a teenager. And we lost all that. And there are a lot of people, there's millions of people back east who share our values. But unfortunately, they're outnumbered by the millions more who are very progressive, very leftist. And there's a lot of reasons that we can explore as to why that is.
Let's do that. Let's do that, Frank. Let's figure it out, because, we can sit here and generalize and say, well, it's the big cities, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, obviously, they're all very progressive. And I'm at a loss to try and figure out why it is that these concentrated areas are all so leftist. Winnipeg, you can say the same. Even Calgary and Edmonton and Alberta seem to be shifting that way. If you look at some of the local elections they've had in the last 20 years, they've got a Marxist as mayor in Calgary. They've got a Marxist as the mayor of Edmonton, for goodness sakes. And they're these neo-Marxists. They're these people who believe in the 15-minute city. They believe in everything that is, trans day of visibility was yesterday, all of that nonsense. And I'm just wondering how this has happened. Is it media saturation? Where did this come from?
I think it's just ideological capture. I think you have universities that pump out particular ideology to get a job in governance, whether you want to be a CAO on a municipal board, or you want to work at the county level, or you want to work in the government. You have to have a certain amount of education. I think we have public sector that's 30% of the labor force, give or take a couple percent, but it's a pretty significant number. a lot of that labor force is concentrated in those cities. And these are people who are ideologically captured. If you go to a protest, I mean, even back in 2017, there's a little video clip on my channel along with those debates of a thing I did in 2017. You see at this protest, you see these union flags, and the union name, CUPE, and all these other unions have the communist symbolism right on their flags. So it's ideological capture. Now, they're very loud. They have incredible clout. The teachers union in Ontario is one of the most powerful, most moneyed unions in the world. They have clout way above their weight class. And everybody has a family. Everybody has children. Everybody seems to know somebody that's tied to the public sector. And they've overwhelmed. And they're very good at getting their people. We on the right, I guess I'm on the right, we neglect the small things, the school board trustees and running for council and mayor. We're focused on the big picture. These guys, they've got the little picture nailed down. They run for all those positions and they implement their ideology through those positions. So I think it's a preponderance of government employees, the fact that they know so many people, the fact that they have big megaphones that are well financed. They've just outgunned everybody else in the East. And I mean, I lived in a small town, an hour and a half outside of Toronto. And even there, you had to be very careful how you engaged in conversation. I think right now, if you went through that little town, that little small town with waving a Trump flag, you'd be lucky if you got through the town without somebody throwing a rock at you, because the level of propaganda and programming is that big. And I love a lot of people back there, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same as here at all.
I find it interesting how they've done this number on Trump as well. I mean, he used to be a media darling. He was making cameos in television shows, movies. He was a big TV star. And then suddenly he's the next coming of Beelzebub. And how did that, that's got to be media capture. The media painted him as this monster, and he's been a monster ever since. And anybody who is associated with him becomes a monster as well. People who used to be darlings of the left, like Tulsi Gabbard and Elon Musk, are now reviled. I mean, they're destroying Tesla dealerships across North America, painting them, firebombing them, shooting into them. And it's amazing to me the reasons that you hear from some of these people. It's astounding. They have absolutely zero capability of explaining themselves. So you call that ideological capture or some kind of hypnosis?
Hypnosis, mass psychosis. It's certainly emotional. It's not reasonable. And one of the biggest problems that I found is I grew up thinking that if I was an autodidact and I taught myself things, that knowing things would actually be advantageous as I got older. But what I found is the further outside of because I'm not commercialized. I haven't been exposed to advertising for 20 to 25 years as a choice. So I'm not aware of how intense pop culture is, whether it's radio or television, how it gets into people's heads. I figured knowing things would be the antidote, but knowing things doesn't seem to matter because people lack even short-term historical perspective. They forget the fact that Trump was a media darling, that he was a friend of all the leftists, that he could go on Oprah Winfrey and do all these talk shows, that he had The Apprentice, which was one of the best television shows of all time, that Elon Musk a year ago was still a hero. Maybe not a year ago, maybe you have to go back a year and a half now, but he was a hero because he was making the electric vehicles that were going to save the planet. And I was having conversations with people about how batteries have a huge environmental footprint. And if you're going to switch all the cars and all the transport grid, as well as all the electricity in your house, to sustainable resources, where are you going to get the gigawatts, thousands of gigawatts of power that's going to be required to do all that? And I was called an idiot and an anti-progressive and all these other aspersions, and that Elon Musk was a hero. Well, now, as you just highlighted, they're attacking Teslas and people who are just driving around on their cars. People who would have been smiled at and high-fived just for buying that car because they were icons of progressivism are now the enemy and targeted for destruction. And these folks have no historical perspective. So it's, how do you get people to acknowledge what is when they don't even have historical perspective that extends back a year and a half. And you need more than that to make informed decisions about the future.
No institutional memory. Look at this person. This is Cat Canada speaking with an Elon Musk protester. Not sure if you guys have seen this, but have a look.
How does
Look at this.
boycotting Tesla save democracy?
It takes down a leader of the movement to dismantle democracy,
What movement?
by Elon Musk, who happens to be Canadian raised as well.
Okay, so what's the problem with Elon Musk? What movement is he leading?
Sorry, I'm not here to debate with you. Sorry, you can do research on Google.
I know I can do research on Google, but you're protesting. I just wanted to ask what movement is Elon Musk a part of that's not good for democracy? Can I see that sign? What does that say? Where's Elon Musk's marbles? What does that mean?
I don't know. Can't you read?
But it's your sign. I'm just asking. I just want to know what it means to you.
What it means is that he's an idiot. That's what it means.
He's an idiot? In what way? What's he doing?
You know what? I don't want to engage with you. Sorry. If you are interested in this topic, please read up about it. It's all over the news, the internet, all kinds of information available to you.
Okay. But you guys are here with the sign, so maybe you know more about it than I do.
I'm not here to explain this to you. I'm here to support this movement.
You're not here to explain it to anyone?
Not to you in particular. No, I've explained it to you, and you refuse to accept it. So
Well, all you said is Elon doesn't have marbles and that he's an idiot. Do you think he's an idiot for like sending rockets into space and stuff?
yeah, I do.
Why?
Okay, listen. I'm not here to debate with you. You're not prepared to accept any information, so sorry.
So at this conservative rally over the weekend, of course, there's always counter protesters that come out. So as I was doing the streeters with people on the line on the way in, right at the front door, there was 8 or maybe 9 counter protesters. And, you know, it was kind of a mishmash of all of them. Climate people and COVID people still there and trans people. And it was, you know, whatever. All from the left. That intersectional thing. One of them was wearing a surgical mask. And I walked over and I said, "Excuse me, but why are you wearing that mask?" And she was irate. You could see it in her eyes, like they were, you know, like that meme of that woman, or is it a guy even? I don't know. Like from years ago, it's like that one. That's how she looked. "I'm a nurse. I work in a nursing home, and I try to protect immunocompromised people." And I said, "You're outside on a beautiful spring day with a wind that could probably knock you on your ass. Plus, none of the other people that you're standing with are wearing masks. Don't you think that you should be upset with them?" No, I don't." "Well, why not?" And then, of course, you know, the subject changes. And I just thought to myself, she could not explain herself. None of them could. None of them can. None of these people. What is that?
It's raw emotion. There's no reason there. They're memeing in real life. They're virtue signaling with all of their being. So that woman in that clip, she doesn't actually know why she's there. She's read that Elon Musk is a bad guy. She said that the interviewer is not ready to accept information, but she didn't try to provide any answers or information. She said, "Go search Google." She didn't even offer a keyword search. When people ask me questions, I say, use keywords and find out. You know, if I can't do the work for you, here's the keywords to go and figure it out, because I'm just a guy with a computer. I can figure it out. It's emoting. It's virtue signaling. It's the current thing. I think that whole meme with the current thing, the NPC current thing, I don't know if you've seen it, the hashtag current thing. I think that captures it perfectly. These people are onto the next thing before the old thing even fades away. And it's superficial. It's the death of reason. It's non-intellectual at all. There's no thought that goes into it. I played a clip in a video either yesterday or the day before where it was literally hundreds of people protesting Elon Musk and Tesla. And I think to myself, This is a heavily propagandized society. This is one of the things that's a little different here in the West. In the East, if you're in a mechanic's workshop, you've got a waiting room, and the TV has CTV or CBC without fail. It has those two 24-hour shows on. If you go into a fast food joint, same thing. There's TVs blaring the exact same news broadcast. Everywhere you go is a TV blaring the propaganda. And in a half hour, they only cover 4 stories, and then they go over it again, and then they go over it again, and then they go over it again. So all you need is a little bit of an old style word, agitprop. I'm sure you got enough gray hairs. You've probably heard that word before. It's a word that people don't use anymore, but you only need maybe 5-10% agitators, and the mass will just go along with it, and they will become motivated. They'll go out there at their own expense, at their own time. So give them credit for that. She's willing to stand in the rain and waste her time doing that because she's been encouraged to do that. These are deeply programmed people, heavily propagandized. In a way, I feel sorry for them because they're broken. Somebody wearing a mask outside, or even somebody, you've seen people driving around in their car, they're all by themselves and they're wearing their medical masks. Those are horribly broken people. They're not thinking, and I almost feel bad for them. Except they're destroying me, and they're destroying my country, and we're all on the same ship, and they're taking it to the bottom, and it doesn't matter how fast we bail water, we're all sinking with it.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, what's your take on getting out of this? But, with all of these heavily propagandized people, what are you going to do with them?
Well, the current
thing?
Well, yeah. No, I mean, when you talk about solutions, I think you have to stop the bleeding. And I think that it's reasonable to say that the Conservative Party of Canada would stop the bleeding at this point. This isn't O'Toole's CPC. It's not perfect, but it's the party in position to kick out the government that's been there for 10 years. I think that's the fair thing to do. I don't know if it's going to solve the structural problems with Canada, but I'm more interested in what's fair rather than in ideal outcomes, because there are those that argue if you elect Carney, well, it's going to sunder the country that much quicker. It'll break it up and we'll all end up independent. That's one scenario, but there's a real chance that doesn't happen, and we're just saddled with this totalitarian universal basic income pushing DEI woke, the guy's got a trans kid nonsense, and we're stuck with it, and we're looking at 5 years of ratcheted up hostility with the United States as the United States creates a gigantic vacuum sucking sound by cutting taxes, creating an inviting business climate, assessing tariffs so that if you want access to the world's largest pool of capital, you have to play by their rules, all while we are doing the opposite up here, all while our total debt for all levels of government and what would you call it, consumer debt or civilian debt? I don't really like, but private held debt it's astronomical. I think we're trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. I think it's like $8 or $9 trillion off the top of my head. So don't quote me on that. It's a lot. We're in a really bad, precarious position, and a lot of people will suffer. And then the other thing to consider is drill, baby, drill. The leases are being snapped up. That oil is going to come online in the next 6 months to a year. Where does that leave Alberta and Saskatchewan if we don't cut a deal with the United States, especially if Ottawa is telling us to turn off the taps? We're going to find ourselves cut off from all of our markets as they replace us, and we'll be in deep. So the solution right now is hopefully a conservative government. If that doesn't work, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to encourage separation of some degree. Like, we have to end the federation. And that's you look at the way this thing's set up. Quebec is the volunteer participant. They never signed the Articles of Confederation. They only participate by an act of provincial parliament. The referendums were just public relations exercises. They can leave whenever they want, and they don't, because it's very lucrative for them to stay. They've bent this country over backwards. That's why you have to speak French to work in the public federal service in Alberta. It doesn't make any sense. So, and they are still opposed to pipelines. They're still opposed to energy projects because it doesn't advantage them. They're the only province doing it right. As much as I can be critical of them, they have exercised provincial authority to the nth degree, while every other province is just getting beat around by the federal government. So we need to copy that model and start a conversation, because equalization is not fair. The control that Ottawa exerts over Western Canada, and the idea that we'll be the first over the wall to die in a battle with the United States, we can't allow that to happen.
You moved across the country a few years ago with a young family because you thought it was the right thing to do, the right way to stay safe, start again, get a new environment, build a new home. Would you be interested in doing that again, leaving this nightmare altogether? Because I'll tell you that in the past few months, I have been hearing from more and more and more people about wanting to leave Canada. Some are even talking about going to the United States and declaring themselves economic refugees. And I look at that and go, I wonder if that's even a possibility. I wonder if Donald Trump would be interested and open to something like that if the Carney government does everything we think he's going to do. And I think he will do it, and he'll do it in short order. Or maybe Mexico. Somebody mentioned to me the other day some Central American country. People are talking about Poland and Hungary. And, would you consider leaving here?
I think we're all facing, if you're a serious person and you understand what is happening out there, we all face the same question. What are we going to do? I don't want to leave. I've been told, when I made a video recently comparing statehood and the rights and privileges of a citizen in the United States to the Federation, with the conclusion that if we were a state, we would be much more sovereign than we are now. And I believe that there's a lot of meat on those bones. And the result of that video was being told that I should just leave the country. If you don't like it, leave. That's what everybody says. Nobody actually has a cohesive argument. They just say, well, why don't you leave then? I don't want to leave. I'm not ready to leave. I came west because I want to make a home here. I like it here. The culture here is wonderful. I think there's an understanding among the people that America is not the enemy, that Ottawa is the adversary and has been for 150 years. And if Carney comes in, then I think the appetite for separation is going to get a lot more ravenous here. I don't want to leave Canada. I'm quite happy where I am. I'm quite happy with my surroundings. If I, maybe there's a little element of not knowing if I could, like if I not having the resources or maybe the ability to sell my home, but I'm not looking to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to leave. I want to work. I'm still dedicated to working on something here. And by the time I'm ready to leave, it'll probably be too late. I'll admit that, but I'm not looking to go anywhere.
Where you are now, have you been there, 3-4 years now?
3 years, almost 3 years, April 21st.
3 years. Have you noticed any changes philosophically from the people around you, or is it still pretty down home Saskatchewan?
I think it's still pretty down home. Yeah, I haven't noticed. I actually think anecdotally I've noticed more American flags being flown proudly where I am. I don't know if it's a huge number, but I am noticing that I don't think you'd get away with flying an American flag by itself in Eastern Ontario where I was before. Whereas here, it's pretty commonplace to see it on a car or see it flying there's one guy in particular, I don't know who he is, but I drove through this town and he's right in the middle of the town, very visible near a high impact intersection. And he's got a huge American flag flying. Nobody's climbing his flagpole or throwing bricks through his windows because everybody knows, right? You go down to Saskatoon and, I've seen guys driving trucks with big Trump flags flying in the back window or flying off the side of the truck. Like it's pretty open. Estevan is practically the United States. The appetite and culture is already here. And I've often highlighted how the Mo government is actually, it's an underrated government. And there's reasons for that. But the Saskatchewan Firearms Act, the Saskatchewan Revenue Act, the rebellion that they successfully prosecuted against the carbon tax here, that's really underrated. He illegally refused to assess a tax that he was legally required to, and he just did it. And now I'm getting chills just thinking about it. I literally am just getting chills because the act hasn't been repealed and we are removing it from everything here. It's still illegal, and he's doing it.
That's interesting. As you say, the appetite may be there, and even the lifestyle is already there. Do you feel that Scott Moe would be interested in some kind of independence from the Federation? We know what Danielle, I mean, I had Jeff Rath on from the Alberta Prosperity Project on Friday night, and they're gung-ho. They're sending a mission down, fact-finding mission down to Washington. I think it's a 12-person crew. They're sending them down there to get all of the information they possibly can, not about joining the United States, but about possibly striking a deal in terms of pipelines, ports, whatever else they can think of to create a situation where Alberta is, in fact, an independent nation. From where they go after that, we don't know. Maybe they do decide they want to move into the United States and become the 51st state. Are you seeing the appetite for that anywhere at all in the Moe government?
I think that those cards are being played pretty tight to his chest right now. I think one day he's kind of signaling towards Canada, and then I think the next day he's kind of signaling towards the Americans. And I don't think we're going to see a more firm position until after the election and we know what we're dealing with. I think Poilievre gets in and there's an opportunity to make a deal and keep the country together for a little while longer. And you can argue and you can make a compelling case that that's one of the worst solutions possible because the broken federation continues ticking on until the next crisis. But I think that's the case. If Carney wins, there's a very stark choice that has to be made fairly quickly because the historic moment has arrived. And if you want to enlist Washington's help or you want to do something, you want to get out, whatever avenue you choose, you're going to have to take a strong position then. And I think that's when you'll find out where the Moe government stands. They understand more than anything I've ever experienced in Ontario. The Moe government listens. They understand their base, they understand their constituency, and they understand just where the appetite is. So they're aware. And he's very much signaled his allegiance is more with Smith than it is with Ottawa. Yeah. So I think we have to wait a little while before we get a more firm idea of where we're all going to go. Everything depends on April 28th.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. The conversation I had with Jeff on Friday night was he's talking about taking provinces, right, as sovereign states. So the way they look on the map now is the way they would go, independent or join the United States, whatever it is. The difference between rural and urban in this province, the one I'm in, Manitoba, is absolutely striking. In a population of 1.5 million, you've got 1 million of those people living in the Winnipeg capital region. So Winnipeg controls everything, economically, politically, everything about this province. And there are people who live outside the city that do not agree with anything the province is doing. As a matter of fact, you get looked down upon if you go outside to the, far outside to the rural areas of Manitoba, and they ask you where you're from. You say Winnipeg. They go, oh, perimeter-itis, which is the highway that circles Winnipeg. It's called the perimeter. And when you go outside the perimeter, it's a rare thing people say, so it's perimeter-itis. But some of those people who live in the western RMs of this province along the Saskatchewan border, I'm sure would be interested in listening to possible separation. Do you see, and this is something I've been talking about for months now, and I think it's possible, do you see the borders changing provincially through rural municipalities voting to join other provinces?
I don't know. I think when borders start changing, things are very messy. The thing that I try to remind people of is how quick, when the historic moment comes, how quick things do change. Two examples I use, and maybe they're bad examples, maybe they're politically incorrect, but they're just used to highlight how things change. Czechoslovakia, 1937, was a country. And without even consulting the president of that country, 4 other powers got together and carved the thing up and gave it away. Austria was a country in 1938, and then the Germans just took it without a shot being fired, and then all of a sudden Austria was no longer a country. And you can go back to the First World War, and you can see the changes that come out of that, and you can go back through history. You can look at France. France, you see cohesive borders, but they're on, I believe it's the Fifth Republic now. How many monarchies? There was an imperial dynasty that got sandwiched in there somewhere under Napoleon. So it's not the same nation. So when change comes, it comes fast, and people say, well, there's all these treaties and there's all these land claims. They won't matter in a time of crisis. So, I mean, borders can change. The city issue, that city-rural divide that you're talking about, is an important issue for Manitoba, and it's an important issue in Alberta. Now, admittedly, Calgary is a bit of a gray zone, but Edmonton is it's a communist hellhole, if I can, sorry if that's strong language, but it is. Saskatchewan is still rural dominant. So there's 3 different balances here, and actually you highlighted that Manitoba is one of the worst balances. It skews very heavy urban in spite of it being a very prairie province. But if the suffering, and this is the thing, the suffering is the great awakener. If Ottawa turns the screws and they actually conduct the trade war they're talking about with the United States, there's going to be a lot of hunger. There's going to be people throwing their keys at the banks again. And it's just going to create a lot of political energy, and somebody's going to tap into that. And it's not going to be energy to keep the country together. It's going to be energy to change things big time.
How far does it have to go, though? How mad do people have to get? How poor do people have to get before they actually act? What we saw with the Freedom Convoy in 2022 was people whose livelihoods were gone because they now had to get the jab to cross the border, these truckers, and they brought a lot of people with them. I'm going to say there's still estimates anywhere between 80 and 120,000, mostly on weekends. They peaked on weekends in Ottawa. And that was quite a thing. And there were millions of people across the country who supported them based on the same reasons. How much do we have to push these sleepers in this country to get them to sit up and go, all right, where do I sign? What do I do?
I think Western Canada is already pretty close to that tipping point. I really think Mark Carney would be the catalyst that pushed it over the edge. I think a Polyev government might pour cold water on it for a little while. The East, on the other hand, like I said, there's millions of good people in the East who get it, but they're outnumbered by millions more who don't. I think they're a long way from it. I think the entire public sector has to fall apart, to be honest with you. Government has to figure out that it can't sustain itself, and that's going to require a lot more response to crisis. So they have this trade war to bring in UBI. They start printing money again. They start a hyperinflationary cycle. Like I think if they do what they say they're going to do, and maybe they won't, because like I said, you can't believe anything Mark Carney says. In the morning, he says one thing, and in the afternoon, he says another one. And I can't believe how duplicitous he is. It's unfathomable. I've never seen anything like it. He doesn't have a center, so nobody really knows what the hell he's going to do. I think the East has a long way to go. I think the West is already there. I think we're at the tipping point already.
Frank, where can people find you? Are you on more than YouTube? Have you got channels all over the place?
I'm on X, so it's FP Vaughan the Third on X. If you just search Frank Vaughan, you'll probably find me. And then I'm on YouTube, and then my website has links to everything, frankvaughan.ca. That's how you find me.
Cool. All right, man. Thank you for coming on tonight. I would love to have you back. It's funny as time goes on, more and more great independent media channels are popping up all across the internet, and I'm happy to have found you and have you on the show. And if we can get a panel one night with yourself, myself, Wayne Peters, get Jasmine Lane on, I get a few other folks just to talk about what's going on in the world, that would be something, don't you think?
Yeah,
love to have that.
We follow each other. DMs are open, so I'm more than happy to do that, especially with a radio voice like yours.
Oh, never mind me. What about you? I was going to ask you got a radio background, but you told me you're just a farmer.
No, man, I can do this all day. You listen to me, I listen to you. We're both happy.
All right, Frank, thanks a lot, man. I'll talk to you again, and I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you too, and thanks to your audience.
Okay, cool. There is Frank Vaughan from the Fulcrum, you guys. What a pleasure to have him on the show tonight. Still got all kinds of news to cover, but you guys have probably already heard this. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to go through it very, very quickly. How about that? Because we do have to get to the extension on shadowdavis.com. We're going to do part 2. Hang on just a second. We had a troll in the comments that I had to remove. Europa, the Final Battle Part 2. But it's going to be an option for all access members tonight. And I'll ask you guys if you want to watch that or testimony of a 33rd degree Mason in the extension tonight. And if you're not a member of the Shadow at Night community on Telegram, go and become one. That's how you chat with us during the extension, which is available on shadowdavis.com. So here's what we have for you guys tonight. I'm going to throw this up here real quick. From the BBC, I don't like to, and I understand the BBC is just as bad as the CBC, but at least it's not Canadian and we're not funding it. But we got this from BBC. Canadian Member of Parliament Paul Chang quit as a Liberal Party candidate over comments he made suggesting a political rival should be turned over to the Chinese consulate in return for a bounty. I'm not sure if you guys saw video of that. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is what the guy said. This is what Paul Chang said. Watch.
Running, most probably is, the Chinese community knows, Zhou Te, Zhang Jing. Right? He is looking for the nomination. The Chinese media knows him. He was in the media business in Hong Kong, and here in Canada, he's a radio host, or I don't know, for Singtel Media or Fairchild. He was a media person, so that's all he did all his life. But also right now, he is wanted by the Chinese government, and there's a $1 million reward on his head. So they want, if you guys want to pick him up and take him to the Chinese consulate, you make him $1 million. I'm just joking, but there is a arrest warrant out for him from the government of China, and there is a reward for him. But apart from that, I can't say more than that right now.
Okay, I want to back that up for just a second here, and let's watch this again. And this guy, look, I'm not sitting here trying to defend liberals, all right? But this guy was a cop in Toronto for 25 years. Look at the tone with which he is saying
He's wanted by the Chinese government, and there's a $1 million reward on his head. So they want, if you guys want to pick him up and take him to the Chinese consulate, you make him $1 million. I'm just joking, but there is a arrest warrant out for him from the government of China, and there is a reward for him. But apart from that, I can't say more than that right now.
Okay, let's remember he is talking to a lot of Chinese diaspora people in his writing, right? He's joking. I get the vibe he's joking. I can't say for sure, 100%, but it certainly sounds like he's joking. Bad joke. Completely and totally. Probably should never have said it. And the second he said it, he should have gone, you know what, I really didn't mean that. I'm joking. I'm joking. Well, there's a lot of people who took him seriously. Among those, Zhou Te, his conservative counterpart in the Markham riding there, who's now apparently living in fear that somebody is going to kick his door in the middle of the night and drag him to the Chinese consulate in Toronto and then have him sent to China where he can be thrown in lifelong prison with the Uyghur people, or get shot or hanged or whatever they do to people, political dissidents in China. I don't know. Should he have been kicked out of the Liberal Party of Canada? Probably. But here's what Mark Carney said about this whole situation yesterday. And then, remember, Joe Chang, he quit very late last night. He quit at like midnight. He released a statement at midnight, seriously. And then Mark Carney changes his tune today. So here's the two sides, as Frank was saying, of Mark Carney.
How can he be an effective representative for them when they no longer trust him after he said this? The question, as you know, Mr. Carney, you know that Canada has executed 4 Canadians this year.
China.
You know that there are human rights activists in China in detention right now. How can Mr. Chang, how can your party keep him as a candidate knowing this context?
Mr. Chang has apologized for his comments. It's a lapse of judgment. He apologized for he's apologized for his comments. He's apologized directly to me. He's apologized directly to the individual. He has a long record of service. He's going to continue his candidacy. Mr. Chang made his resignation, offered his resignation last night. I accepted it. As I said yesterday, his comments were deeply troubling and regrettable. We will move on with looking for a new candidate for Markham, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, okay, so you guys, say he's a politician, not a comedian. Look it, man, in life, sometimes we make jokes. We don't have to be standing on a stage with a microphone when we say them. Sometimes you just say dumb shit. That's life. The question that I would have for this Joe Chang fellow would be this. Did you mean that, dude? Did you mean that? Because we know there's a lot of Chinese-influenced politicians and bureaucrats, whatnot, in this country. There's more than 11. There's many more than 11. So who are the 11? No, 11. That's scratching the surface. Is this guy controlled by communist China? Or was he just making a joke? Do you actually believe that, Joe? No, it was just something stupid I said. I'm going to come back to you tomorrow on this one. I'm going to ask you the same question. If I don't believe you, then you're fired. I think at some point, we have to stand up behind our candidates. Look at this one, for example. Now, this one bothered me a little bit, too. Conservatives drop Windsor's Mark McKenzie over death penalty comments, including a joke about Justin Trudeau. Again, it's a joke. Let me make this bigger so everybody can see. All right, so let's scroll down. The Conservative Party of Canada. And Poilievre came out today and said, yeah, that's it. He's fired. We fired him. They dropped Windsor-Tecumseh Lakeshore candidate and city councillor Mark McKenzie on Tuesday over controversial comments that surfaced on the campaign trail. In a podcast, February of 2022, before he was a politician, McKenzie expressed support for the death penalty, which I don't see as controversial, and appeared to include then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on a list of people who should be executed. It's a joke. YouTube and Facebook algorithms, it's a joke. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre was asked about McKenzie during a campaign stop in St. John's today. We fired him. He's gone. Unacceptable. That's what Poilievre said. McKenzie made the questionable comments on the Mark and Chris podcast, a segment of which was obtained by the Toronto Red Star. I'm also in favor of public hangings. I think they need to bring that back. I want the public hanging because it's longer. Okay, that one, that goes far, too far. And when you're looking at it in print, it looks horrendous. But I'm sure if you heard it on a comedy podcast, it might not sound so bad. I think they should bring back the electric chair as well. But again, only if you're like 1,000,000% positive. In the podcast, McKenzie called for Canadian serial killer Paul Bernardo to receive the death penalty. Just effing kill that guy. Why are my tax dollars going to keep this guy alive? Charles Manson, like people like that? Jeffrey Dahmer, you know what I'm saying? If you're 100% certain, Epstein's, this is what I'm saying, Justin Trudeau. So then he throws the name Justin Trudeau in there. He didn't say that Justin Trudeau should be. He just threw the name in there. And he laughed after making the statement. Anyway, the Conservatives got rid of him today in very short order for being on a comedy podcast before he was ever a politician. What do you think about that, now that the shoe is on the other foot? Speaking of Poilievre and Carney, big contrast between these two. And I know many people are saying, well, no, it's just two wings of the same bird. Yeah, I get that. On certain things, Ukraine, definitely, that's a problem for me. A lot of people feel the same way. Let's get out of Ukraine, stop wasting our money on Ukraine. We have nothing to do with Ukraine militarily. They're not in NATO. We're not allied with them in any way. We have no obligation to Ukraine whatsoever, except for the fact that there's a lot of third and fourth generation Ukrainians who live in Canada. And maybe it's good for politics, and maybe it's good for the war machine. I don't know, the military-industrial complex, as much as Canada could ever contribute to something like that. But there is a big difference between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney when it comes to energy. Mark Carney is a guy who wrote in his books, and he said over and over, he's a climate net zero zealot. An absolutist. He wants to leave oil and gas in the ground. Absolutely. Doesn't want pipelines. Poilievre says we've got to get these pipelines up and running if we want to be able to be self-sustaining as a country. So here's the contrast today, talking about C-69, which is the No More Pipelines law. Poilievre first and then Carney.
1, repeal the No New Pipelines law and the tanker ban, so that we can ship our resources to non-American markets. I voted against C-69. I have always been against C-69. I've said I will repeal C-69, the No New Pipelines liberal law, within 60 days of becoming Prime Minister. Mark Carney supported C-69, and he had a week after he became leader to recall Parliament to repeal it, as I demanded, but he did not.
How do you reconcile keeping Bill C-69 with your plans to build infrastructure in Canada? Do you plan to repeal Bill C-69?
We do not plan to repeal Bill C-69, to answer your question directly.
Okay, so they're not going to get rid of the tanker ban. They're not going to get rid of the pipeline ban, but Poilievre will. Carney talks about other ways that we can jumpstart the economy, but let's be honest. Who is Brian Gould? Brian Gould is the CEO of Aspen Leaf Energy, which is a rather large energy company based in Canada. And he was speaking with, what's his name? The former president of the Liberal Party of Canada. He's a bald-headed guy, wears glasses. Stephen Ledrew. And Stephen Ledrew does a 3-minute piece daily interviewing different people. Watch what Brian Gould says about Mark Carney. This is very interesting.
I hear this all the time. They say, Canada is falling flat. Our economy is falling flat. We've known that for 10 years. Is it true that nothing is getting approved at all?
Yes, it's true. But before I answer your question directly, I want to make 3 points to set a foundation for you, Stephen. So number one, the modern world works on energy, steel, cement, fertilizer, and plastics. That's
all those things our Prime Minister doesn't like.
All those things he doesn't like, and that's a reality. So that's point one. Point number two, this discussion about net zero transition of fossil fuels isn't happening, can't happen, won't happen, and I would suggest to you is immoral and sinister, because there are 7 billion people on this planet that are hungering for more energy. That's point two. Point three, as you've just alluded to, Canada has just suffered through a lost decade where rather than moving forward, we've been moving backwards. And you won't know the statistics better than I in terms of prosperity, wealth, security, safety, you name it.
Even some of the poorest states in the United States, even some of the poorest countries in the world, had greater growth in their economies than Canada over the last 10 years.
Alberta, as Canada's wealthiest province, is poorer than the poorest state in the United States now. That's how far we have slid.
But Canadians know that, Brian.
And say they know this. Now, in direct answer to your question, if I may, I would call on Mr. Carney to tear down his walls. And there are 3 elements to that. One is the regulatory morass that his government has created. And it's not just the Impact Assessment Act. It's tanker bans, it's plastic bans, and on it goes.
Now, let me say, I know somebody out there saying, well, it's not his government. He's only been here for 2 or 3 weeks. But he has been advising Justin Trudeau for years, correct? And there's a guy by the name of Butts, who is Trudeau's best advisor for 10 years, who's advising him now.
Correct. And if you want to know where he really stands, go read his book, Values, which I read on the airplane coming in here. And if you read his book, you'll understand what he really stands for and what he really has been doing this last number of years.
Net zero.
Net zero, eliminate plastics, central planning, big government control, government telling you how to live your life, what you should eat, how you should live, what vehicle you should drive, what clothes you should wear.
He's a bureaucrat. He wants to tell you everything.
I would actually argue that he's not a bureaucrat, he's a totalitarianist.
He is a totalitarianist. Now, here's something interesting. Look at this. This is Canada Elections Tracker. There are 343 ridings now in Canada, and the Liberals have got candidates nominated in 333 of them. They haven't got them all yet. The Conservatives, they lost one today, so they're down to 332. The Greens have got 291 candidates. The People's Party of Canada's got 290. And then the NDP, only 242. They're 101 candidates short of a full slate here. Now, if you go ahead and do a little bit more research like I did yesterday and then stupidly got rid of the website that was open, and I wanted to show you guys, especially in Alberta and in Saskatchewan, there are many ridings that don't have an NDP candidate, but they do have a Liberal candidate, a Conservative candidate, and a PPC candidate. I think what's going on here is that the NDP, and Jagmeet Singh says, don't worry, we'll have a full slate before the end of the campaign. Dude, you've only got 27 days left before the campaign is over, and you got to nominate 100 new candidates? I don't think it's going to happen. I think this is being done intentionally. I think the NDP are running candidates in ridings where there are Liberals, hoping for the PPC and Conservatives to split the vote so the Liberals can win seats in places like Alberta and Saskatchewan. I believe it's collusion. And is Max Bernier in on this by running candidates in these ridings? Does he actually think he can win? I don't know. But it's possible he could split a Conservative vote just enough to allow a Liberal to slip in a riding they're not supposed to win in a place like Alberta or Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Eastern British Columbia. It's absolutely possible. Absolutely possible. Okay, one more story before we head to the extension tonight. I want to throw this up, and you guys are going to go, what the hell's this? I don't know what this is. I'll show you what this is in just a second. This comes from the United States Attorney General's Office, Western District of Texas. United States unseals charges for theft of Texas Republican Party data. So let's go down here. The Department of Justice announced the unsealing of charges against Canadian national Aubrey Caudill, 37, of Oshawa, in connection with the theft of data relating to the Texas Republican Party in 2021. Canadian authorities arrested Caudill on Wednesday last week and are pursuing charges under Canadian law. He's been charged with unlawfully transferring, possessing, or using a means of identification with the intent to commit or aid or abet or in connection with unlawful activity under state or federal law. If convicted, he faces a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison. Who is Aubrey Caudill anyway? This is Aubrey Caudill.
I doxed the truckers! I did it! It was me! I had to give send go, baby! And I'd do it again! I'd do it 100 times! I did it! I did it! Come at me! What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do to me, huh?
We're going to arrest you and throw your ass in jail for 5 years, you rainbow-haired son of a bitch. That's it for the show tonight, you guys. Thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Love you all. Appreciate you all. I'll catch you tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central, for another Shadow at Night live stream. The extension coming up in, a couple of minutes over on shadowdavis.com for All Access members. If you're not an All Access member, go become an All Access member, and we'll see you there. And don't forget to join the group on Telegram, the Shadow at Night community on Telegram. That's where we do all our chatting. See you there in a couple of minutes. Bye for now.